Hello everyone. In this video, I'm trying to build some sort of framework that you can use to create a simple PHP application. When I talk about simple, it can be extended to different size of the application you want to, but basically I want to create a structure that allows you to organize your code. So you have your PHP code in a separate place and then your CSS, your HTML, and so on. Also, I want to be able to separate the logic and the view. So I want to have certain functionality that belongs to an action that a user can take while they're on our page, and also run those code and generate a result. So what we want to do is, as I said, I want to separate all these things. So let's go ahead. In our project, I will go ahead and create a folder. I'll call it app. So this is most of the code goes, and is restoring all the actions we're going to take, every other include file that we want to add to our project, and so on. I also create another folder. I call it public. The public folder, you got to consider this is your htdocs or is public_html on your web hosting. And whatever you see in the app is going to be outside the public folder, so it's not accessible to the browser. Now, what I want here is I want to go ahead and create some of the folders that I need in order to run my application. So very first folder I need is called config, which allows me to keep the configuration file in there, anything that is commonly used across my application. So I'll put it in that config folder. It can be multiple config folder. In this tutorial, I will have only one that actually specifies some of the information that I need to use throughout the site. For instance, I want to see where the codes are, where the HTML codes are, where our library or the functions that I want to use throughout the applications are, right? So the other one that I need, the other folder that I need is the model. Model is where you actually put all the PHP code that takes action based on the parameter it receives. So it generates content, receives content, and respond back to the request, right? I want to create another one, another folder. It's called view. So the view folder contains all the HTML related to the models that I have. So in this case, I can have a model that does the logging, and then I have a view that actually generates the login form or the result of the logging, right? So remember, what goes into the view is the HTML file. What goes into the model is basically the functions or the functionality of the PHP that I want to take care of the request that we are receiving to our PHP script. I'm going to add one more directory. I'll call it lib. This is what I keep all the library file I have. In this one tutorial, I will have only one file, and that one file will be called functions, which I have a common function that I want to use across the site, not related to the particular action that can be taken by the visitor, but any other functionality that is common that I want to use across the site. Now, since these are the folders that I need in the app, I need inside the public, I need one file. So I will create a PHP file. I'll call it index.html, index.php. This is acting as a bootstrap or as a file that receives all the requests. So whatever request comes, it should come to this file. The file analyzes the request, and it will load a proper module or proper view that can be associated to the action that is requested, right? So if I go to this file, there are a few things I have to take care of here first. So the very first thing is I have to figure out, since remember this public folder is this index.php is in the public folder, and our application is outside the public folder. So I have to create certain paths that allows me to access the application folder. For that reason, I'm going to use this defined, if it is defined, application path. So I'm just creating a constant that checks if such a constant is created or not. If it's not created, simply as you can see where it says or, I simply go ahead and let me just close this so I can show you better content here. So I say if this is about get the real path, directory name, whatever is this file name, and just we go relative path and point to the application folder or app folder. So now anytime I want to include anything from the app folder, I simply need to use this constant variable to be able to access this. So the other thing I need to do is I want to go ahead and create a configuration file here. So for now, I'll just create the file. I'll call it config.php. And there are a few information that is going here that I will come back to this file later. But let's go ahead and include that configuration file, because as I said, all the requests come into index.php, and the configuration file will contain some of the information about where, what is where, like where is the model, where is the view folder, where is the lib folder, and so on, right? So let's go ahead and do one thing first. If I come back to index.php, I'll simply go ahead and I want to add another constant here, because remember, the one of the things is this file can run on both a different operating system. When I said both, I meant Windows and Linux, but it can run any other operating system as well, as long as you have the PHP installed. And in some of the operating system, the directory separator are different. So instead of us doing backslash or forward slash, so it's becoming a mess. What I do is I create a constant, and I use a constant variable in PHP that, based on the operating system this PHP is running, is going to change to the appropriate directory separator when the code is running. Just to make it short, I call it DS and put it in the constant. So the next one is I want to be able to go ahead and include the config file. So if you remember, I just created the config file inside the config folder, right, this file. So I want to include it here. Remember, I said the application path tells me where the app directory is. So I can go ahead and require, so I want to include the file, the config file here, and at the same time I use require because it is important to have the configuration file. If the configuration file cannot be included for any reason, then I cannot continue with the application. So that's why I'm using require but not include. So I'll go ahead and I add the application path, right? I use the dot to concatenate. I use the directory separator. So application path in this case is the app, and I'll put the slash at the end, and then I will simply go ahead. This is inside the conf, right? So I'll go ahead and I'll go to the config folder, right? Again, I will go add directory separator. And now is the time to go ahead and access the file. So if you look at this, application path is pointing to the app folder. I go inside the config, like here is, right? And then I'm accessing the file. So this way, I have included the config file. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to the config file and start adding the information I need to use across this application into the config file. There are many different ways of creating this config file. You can create a constant variable. You can go ahead and create ini file, and you can use an array as well. So for this tutorial, I'm going to use an associative array to hold the information I need, right? So let me go to the config file. I will go ahead and create a variable called config, config. And I'll go ahead, create my array, and this is what I'm going to do. So first thing is I will go and say, okay, I want to be able to access the model, view, and lib in my application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a key, call it model path, and simply I will say the model path is in application path. If you remember, we just created this, right? ds dot. Let me just make this one uppercase. Okay, ds model, right? And I will put the directory separator at the end as well too. Let me just make sure. Yes. Okay, here you go. All right. So what I did is the model path array element will hold the path where model folder inside the app folder is. So I got to do this for the other ones too. So let me go ahead and make this one to view path, right? So definitely this has to change to the view as well, right? I need one more, I believe, for now, and that is the lib path. Remember, I have another one called lib. So I'll go ahead and change this one to lib path, and simply I will go ahead and do this. So now that I have this, what I'm going to do is I just want to go ahead and show you the value first. So I'll go here and I do printer config, because I just included the file right in here, right? So let me see if I can go to the terminal right where I am. I just go cd to public, right? Okay, now I'll go and run this command using the PHP server that is shipped with the PHP. So I'll go ahead, PHP dash uppercase S localhost colon, let's go on port 800, huh? So I run this on the port 800. So if I open a browser, I can simply go ahead to localhost port 800, right? So if I do this, hopefully I will get something up. Here you go. So I have the data in there. As you can see, I see, let me just put the pre here so you can see better. So go ahead, pre, and I will just refresh this. Here you go. So this is the exact same thing I have saved into the config array. So now anytime I want to access the model, I just use the model key, model path key, view path, and delete path, depends as what is that I want to do. So I'll just minimize this. What I want to do next is I want to go ahead and add a few other information into index.php as well. Now, the way it works is I want to go ahead and first write a function that allows me to get the parameter, so a value from the parameter list. Now, so what I do is I go to the lib. These are part of the common function. I'll go here, create a file. I'll call it functions.php, right? So the function I need to read the parameter that are passing to this script or any script and say, okay, give me the value of these parameters. So I'll go ahead and create a function. I'll call it get. It receives the name of the parameter, and in order to be able to have more control over this function, I will pass the default value in case if the parameter is not passed to this page or cannot be found. So I'll call this default value, and by default I use the empty string as its value. Okay, now of course what I need to do is I need to get the parameter. So I can use the request in this case if I need to, right? I will use the name. So in this case I'm saying go to the request, find the name that is passed. So later on I can say get, for instance, color. If I do this, it looks into the request associative array and tries to locate the color parameter and gets its value, right? Now, I have to make sure this parameter exists, otherwise it's gonna generate an error. So I'm going to use the isSet function, right? So if this is set, if this exists, simply I use a ternary operator here, and I say return the value of this parameter in the request. Otherwise, just simply return the default value. So now what happened here is whenever I call this function, like in this case, if I call this function and and if the color is not part of the request, simply it will return me an empty string. Now, since I have the second parameter, which is an optional parameter, I can go ahead and simply can add. So in this case, I can go ahead and let's say put something like this, white. Right? So if it can't not find that name in the request, it simply is going to return white whenever this is not set, right? So what I'm going to do is I just simply go ahead and say return this, and obviously I don't need this anymore. Now, what I want to do is this. I want to go ahead and use that get function, but the main thing here is to explain. Let me just bring this one up first. Okay. The main thing is I want to be able to pass a parameter to this framework and ask the framework to load the page. So what I'm going to do is in every single call that I make to index.php, I simply go ahead and add the parameter called page, and I pass the page name. So for instance, it's going to be home, contact, and whatever it is, or products, right? Whatever is the page name, I will pass it this way. Now, the very first thing is in order to get this value, I have to go ahead and I will create a variable, I'll call it page. I use my built-in function, in this case is the library function. So of course, in order for me to be able to use the library function, I have to include it into my application. So what I'm going to do is I simply go to the config file and add it there. So this is safer because config is going to be added to the whole project as well, right? So I'll go ahead and I use the require this time, and I will use my config array, and definitely I'm going to use the lib path, right, like this, and simply I'll go ahead and say give me the functions. Let me just put this one as a string here, definitely. Functions. Did I call it functions or function? Let me just check this. I'll call it functions, right? Functions.php. So right now, I'm including this file into my project as well. So now if I go back here, I simply have included this. So I'm going to put the name. What do I want? I want to get the name for page. Now, if there is no parameter is passed, because at the same time, whenever you go to the index.php, this means you want to look at the home page. So I'm going to pass the default as home. So I'm saying if parameter page is not there, simply return me back the home parameter or home value, right? So I've done that. Let's go ahead and try to load the model and the view. So what I'm going to do is, in order to make my life a bit easy, I'll create a variable, and simply I will say, okay, this is equal config. So what I want to do is, I will name the view and the model the same name as the page parameter. So for instance, if this is home, I will have a file called home.php inside the model, and I have another one, home.php inside the view, right? So what I'm going to do is I'll go to the config. I simply will go and add the model path, right? This goes to the model. I include the page, and of course I need the extension as well. Is that correct? Yeah, here you go. So if I go here, I actually will look into the model folder for a file that is called whatever is the page, right? So for that reason, I'll go ahead and I do this. I'll go ahead and create a page. I'll call it home.php. In this one, simply go ahead and let me just put the PHP back. We'll go ahead and say echo h1 or yeah, let's do that. I'm going to change this one later on. So I will say hello, this is home page. Okay, so I have that done, right? So if I go right now to index.php, this way, this will be loaded, right? Because it goes to the model, it looks for the home, and simply will load the home.php. Now that I've done that, what I have to do is, remember, this is just a pad. I'm creating the pad. I did not load the file yet, right? I also need to see if there is any view associated with this page as well. So I'm going to do the same thing. This one, view path, view path, right? Definitely I'm going to call this view. Okay, the rest should be staying the same. So I have the view, I have the model as well. What I want to do is I also want to check to see if the model and view exist. Then I want to load them, right? Otherwise, you should not load that because it does not exist. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to use the function called file exists, or I can say is file, right? Almost the same, almost. And I will go ahead and say, okay, let's see if the model exists, because remember, model is the absolute path to where the model file is that I want to roll. And then I will simply say, okay, what I want is I want to require the model. Remember, this variable contains the path to the model file. In this case, it's going to be home.php inside the model folder, right? So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if the view exists. So the way I do this is simply I will go here and I will just again check file exists, right? And I'll put the model, right? Okay. And simply what I do here is a bit different. Now, let me just do the require for now, so it makes more sense. And then later on, I will change this a little bit. Okay. So up to now, if you look at this, we have the application path. We include all the necessary thing while looking for the parameters, which I create a function called get inside the function. So I'll get the page name. If it's pass, if it's not pass, simply I'll make it home. I'll create a path to the model and the view, and I check if the model exists, I include the file. If the view exists, then I include the file as well. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and run this and see what is the result. Okay, let's go to the browser and refresh our page. Oops, I get an error. So I cannot find the home.php line 19. Let's go back to this. Oh, we can. Okay, this is my mistake. So it's the view, right? So I was checking for the model, but I tried to load the view. Of course, I don't have any view in the view folder called home.php, so it's gonna fail too. So let's go ahead and save this. Go back to the browser, refresh this. Yeah, look at this. Hello, this is homepage. Where does this come from? So if I look at this, simply in home.php, I have this content. Now, I can have a view file as well. Let me just go ahead and create that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a file to just make sure this is a view file. I do it differently. I'll go here and I'll call this home.phtml this time. It's a PHP and HTML mix, right? You can call it any extension you want, honestly, but this way you can separate the view from the source file as well. So here, this is your view. So this is where you put your HTML page, home page, and the good thing is because these files, if you look at this, first the model is loaded or included into the file, and then the view, so I can declare a variable into the model. Let's call this, let me just go ahead and do this, title, I'll call it my homepage. Okay, my homepage I think is enough. I cannot find any other word. So here it is. Instead of this, I simply go ahead and say PHP echo the variable title, right? Remember, since we are including this file one after another, right? First, I load the model, I declare the variable here, then I load the view. Simply, I can use the variable that I declare in model inside the view as well. So if I save this file, go back to the browser and refresh the page, I do not get anything. Let me check one thing. So if I go to PHTML, I have the echo title, I have the page here as well. And, oh, okay. You know what is the problem? Look at this. The extension I set at PHTML, but if I go to index, I simply looking for PHP. So I cannot find the file. It does not include it. So I will go ahead PHTML here, right? Now if I go and refresh this page, here you go. You see that? So any variable you can create inside the model, and then simply you can access it in the view as well. So this is the model that let me just go to the model, which is .php. So you can see I have created a variable and I have the model which prints that variable. Now, inside the model is all the action is taking place. So you can do if statement, while loop, accessing database, file system, whatever is that you want to do is going to happen inside the model, right? And the result will be passed to the view in order to be able to print the view. So I believe as far as we just tried, let's go ahead and create one page to see how this model view will work as well. So what I want to do is I simply want to test something else too. Let me bring the browser up. Okay, so I said I just have to go and say question mark, or I can say index.php, whichever you prefer. Since if you put the question mark, it's going to call the default page. I would say page is equal, let's say test page, right? So if I do this right now, it should actually go ahead and load the home.php. Why? Because in my code, I said by default, if the file is, let me check one thing. Let me go back to my code. I think I made a mistake here. What did I say in an index? I said, okay, look for the page. If you cannot find the page, you make it home. I made a mistake. Sorry about that. So this is what happened. If I don't pass anything here, simply since no home parameter is passed or no page parameter is passed, by default is going to get the home, right? But if I go ahead and say, okay, my page is test page, then it actually doesn't do anything and it just goes to the code and tries to locate those. So that is why we have file exist, right? If the file doesn't exist, it doesn't do anything. But I want to show something to the user as well. So in case if there is any issue, I actually want to go ahead and show an error message or something like 404, right? So what I'm going to do for this is I'll go say else. I'm going to change this a little bit later, but for now, I will go and say, okay, what I want is I want to have, let me just do this. I'll go here and I create another variable. I'll call it underscore 404. So this is a not found page, right? So in case if the page is not found, I'm going to load a view, or I'll provide a path to a view that is for 404, or page not found, right? So let's go ahead and change this to 404.html. Does that make sense? I hope so. So what I do is I go to the view, new file, new file, 404.html. Okay, so here I'm going to create, let me just create some design here so you can see it better. So I'll go style, margin, I'll call it 0 auto, right? And let's go ahead and say font size 72, and color, let's make it rect, 72 pt, of course. Okay, so I'm going to do this, and I just simply put 404 here, right? Now that I did this, let's go back to the browser and try this. Okay, so nothing yet. Now I need to access the 404. So what I'm going to do is I'll go back to here and I say, if this doesn't exist, simply require $_ underscore 404. So I'm going to load the 404 page, right? Let's see if that works. Hopefully it does. So go back here, refresh this. Here you go. I got the 404. I don't know why the center doesn't work, but simply you can center the whole thing and make it bigger as well. Now, so let's go ahead. I want to go ahead and create a page called test, load the page, load the model if it exists, and actually see the result. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I go ahead inside the model. If I need the model, I can ignore the model altogether. I'm going to create one for now. So I will go ahead and create a PHP file. I'll call it test.php. This can be contactus.php, product.php, whatever is the file or action that you want to take, right? So I'll call it test.php, and here I will go ahead and say echo, this is the test. This is the test module, right? Or model, sorry. Let me just remove that extra space here. It's not needed. And make this uppercase as well. Okay. Then I will go ahead and create a file for the view. I will go ahead and I say test.phtml. It's very important that the model and name to have the same name so you can easily load them. So here I will say this is the view of the test page. And of course, I can go ahead and have any kind of PHP I want here as well, but it's better to put all the PHP that you need inside the model, right? So echo, this is PHP section of the test page. Okay, so this is done. Let's go ahead to our browser, refresh this. Now I should be able to get this. This is the test model. This is the view of the test page. This is the section of the test page, right? So as you can see, all these are coming together, and simply it can access different files. So for any action that you want to do, or for any workflow you have, for instance, you want to view, edit, delete, and so on, and in certain things or certain part of your application, you just need one model file and you need one view file, or you can have multiple view in the same file. So it all depends how you lay out this, but this gives you a simple way of building an application and managing a PHP application in somehow an organized manner. I hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely I'm going to add to this one. So I'm planning to add the layout to this, so you can have a main layout, and this main layout will contain your menu item, the footer, and so on, something that can be repeated in many different pages as well. So you just concentrate on creating the action and the view for whatever action you want to do during your application. Also, I'm planning to add the Twitter Bootstrap to this application later on, so you can see how it's going to be easy to manage this file in future video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you find this, you enjoy watching this video. Have a good day. See you guys later.